Welcome, everybody. This is an occasion put on by Jewish Voice for Liberation. Sorry, our card still says Jewish Voice for Labour, but we've changed our name recently, as I'm sure you all know. Jewish Voice for Liberation's education team. And it's a bit of a new departure for us because we've not shared a film with people coming to these events before. This is a very special film, as Sonja will explain in a lot more detail, I know. But it is a film made by a young Israeli-American director called Omri Dayan, quite recent. And it's based on, what's not based on, it is actually an enactment of Caryl Churchill's 2009 play, Seven Jewish Children, which was extraordinarily controversial at the time it was put on, but Sonja will explain all about that. And we're very privileged to have Sonja here as our guest. We have circulated her most impressive biog with your invitations to come along this evening. So just to say for now that she is herself a playwright and founding artistic director of Ice and Fire Theatre, among many other accomplishments, and she's extraordinarily well qualified to have a look at Caryl Churchill's original play, the effect of its transfer to a film medium, and what we can learn from the play itself and from the whole furore about it and its relevance for today as well.
Tell her it's important to be quiet.
Tell her to call up so she's dead, but not to sing.
Tell her it's a story. Tell her it's an adventure.
Tell her it's the land God gave
Don't tell her
us.
religion.
Don't tell her to think Jews or not Jews.
Tell her when she's
More
older.
when she's older.
Tell her
Don't
something.
tell her she doesn't belong here.
Don't tell her who used to
About
live in
camels
this
in the
house.
desert and
Like,
pigs.
Tell her we
Let's
won't.
be
Tell her
careful.
not to be
Tell her
frightened.
not
She
to
can't
be
watch
frightened.
Tell her they said
Tell her
this was
she
a lamb
can
now.
watch
Tell her you
cartoons.
can't believe what you see on
We
television.
love her. Tell her dead or alive, her family all love her.
I'm sure everybody will want to take a moment or two to absorb what we've just seen. A few people came in while the film was screening. Maybe those people had already seen the play or seen the film, but just to point out that the scenes, the 7 scenes that we see, do go right back to 1903. I can't remember if it's Ukraine or Russia, Sonja, but predating the Balfour Declaration. And then there's a scene set in the UK in 1945, so still predating the foundation of the state. So it is about the Jewish experience, not just about an Israeli experience. If everybody sort of girded their loins emotionally and so on, I think it's time to hand over to Sonja.
Well, I've seen the film a number of times. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I'll speak about the film, but I'll also speak about the play, which I did actually see at the Royal Court in 2009 when it was written. And if it was pertinent then for Operation Cast Lead, by God, it's even more pertinent now, particularly that last speech, which, of course, Howard Jacobson and all the people who were absolutely fulminating and saying that it was anti-Semitic, he called it a wantonly inflammatory piece because the Jews drop in on somewhere they have no right to be, despise, conquer, and at last revel in the spilling of Palestinian blood. I mean, that last speech says it all, in fact. We'll come back to that. But let me just sort of start from the beginning. I saw the play in 2009. It was a prequel. It was put on just before the main play of the evening. So Dominic Cook, who was the artistic director and is Jewish, he made space for it by allowing it to be on for 10 minutes on the stage of the production of that night. And I went because I wanted to go and see it, and also my daughter happened to be working at the Royal Court. She's also at the theatre, in theatre like me, and I knew about it. But also I knew a third of the cast. So I knew it was a fully Jewish cast, which was a deliberate choice on the part of Dominic Cook. And I knew Ruth Posner, who played the grandmother, and I knew Jack Chiswick, who played another role, and I knew Jenny Stoller, who sadly is no longer, and Ruth herself passed away a few weeks ago and was in the press quite a lot because she chose to go to Switzerland with her husband. And Ruth is a child survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. And when she was presented with the script, she really scrutinized it because her big obsession in life since her childhood, when she was in the Warsaw Ghetto and escaped, unlike the rest of her family, she was saved by her aunt. And her parents asked her aunt to save her and escape from the ghetto, knowing that they may not survive. Her huge thing in her life was the rise of anti-Semitism, which she saw increasing. And we had issues towards the end of her life because despite the fact that she was in this play and she checked it out with her cousins in Israel, and she was absolutely deeply shocked at the reaction to it, at the negative reaction, and at it being called anti-Semitic, because she was made absolutely sure that this was not anti-Semitic in her eyes. And ironically, towards the end of her life, when she was more and more concerned about anti-Semitism, she actually was the poster girl for Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which was an irony. And I would have discussions with her and say the anti-Semitism is actually really a result of what Israel is doing at the moment, and it's creating, and it's anti-Zionism, and in the end, shortly before she died, actually, when I had the discussion with her, she actually did finally concede that genocide was happening. So that was an interesting trajectory from her point of view. So I saw the play, and maybe some of the people who are watching tonight also saw the play. And of course, it's very elliptical. And what we didn't have is we didn't have quite a lot of the hints that were helpful in the film. So there was no placards, there was no suggestion of a timeline. I mean, if any of you have seen the script, it's just a series of lines, and it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. And you do get a sense of the historical progression. But when you're taking it in, as I did on the stage, it needed quite a lot of deconstructing very quickly in your head as you were watching as to what these lines actually meant. So even though I thought it was brilliant as a short 10-minute play, I thought the film, in a way, certainly as an educational tool, did it more justice, because it did start with a date. It started, didn't it, with 1903 on a placard, and it said the Russian Empire, Ukraine, the Russian Empire. And with each chapter, if you like, or each section, they gave you a date. And that was helpful, I think, in you able to follow, this is a historical progression, you know, from the pogroms when we were the victims, and then the victim turned perpetrator or turned oppressor, which is the final culmination. So for me, in a way, the film worked better. I thought it was brilliantly done. I loved this sort of Brechtian nature of the film, where you are actually seeing the film almost deconstructed. You're watching them move from set to set, changing costumes. So you are aware at the same time that they are both characters and actors, which was sort of Brecht's distancing, alienation technique. So he wanted you to both have the emotion, but also be stepping out of the emotion by realizing that this is both a piece of art, but it's also it's real life. That he wanted you to use your intellect as well as your emotions, because he was giving you a political message, which is what this film is giving. And so I thought the way they did the film, the artistic nature of the film per se, was rather brilliant. Interesting that Omri Dayan, who, as you probably know, is an American Israeli, though his sister was born in Israel. His parents were from Israel, but he was brought up in the United States from a theatrical family. So in fact, his grandmother played the role of the grandmother in the film, and his father was also played the role of the older man in the film. And this was, in fact, as you may or may not know, also his first professional short film. In fact, was almost his graduation film, and it was being constructed by him in the run-up to, I mean, in September of 2023, he was actually doing the editing. He was editing it in October, on the 7th of October itself. He was in the process of editing the film. So it wasn't directly a response to October the 7th. It was just synchronicity. And Caryl Churchill herself has given her blessing to the film, and I think has done a remarkable job in the creation of it. And when I watch the film each time, and you can all watch it again, and it's worth watching more than once, because it's absolutely free online, as you know, it's on a YouTube. And when I watch it with the script alongside. I find that quite helpful. That's what I did tonight as well. And it's worth rewatching and watching it with the script. I think you can all find the scripts, it's online, and perhaps it's been sent to you by Naomi or by Miriam. And so the other reason I think that Naomi asked me to speak about it is that after the furore about the film, I was asked by Index on Censorship to write an article to comment on the fact that Radio 4, the BBC Radio, refused to put it on as a radio play, because they were approached to put it on as a radio play. And the response was, after due consideration, we felt it would not work for our audience, which is a most remarkable, obscure response. And the BBC Radio 4 controller at the time, Mark Damazer, he was the Radio 4's drama commissioning editor, and the commissioning editor of Radio 4, Jeremy Howe. They both agreed it was a brilliant piece, and yet they couldn't show it because they claimed they couldn't show the equivalent side to create a sort of balance. They said it would be nearly impossible to run a drama that counters Caryl Churchill's view. Well, why? I mean, you could have found do you need that? So it was a very pathetic, and by now we know the BBC's response to anything that's connected with Israel, Palestine, or Gaza, or the current genocide. We know even more now about BBC's refusal to comment or to give us a fully fledged response, such as we would require. It's structured around 7 scenes, as you know, and it depicts Jewish families grappling with how to protect their youngest daughter. And I think it does it very brilliantly. It's a brilliant summation of how Jews have moved from being victim to perpetrator and oppressor, and does it in this brilliant, very compressed and form. So I'm going to stop now, because maybe you want to ask me some questions, Naomi, or maybe you would like to elicit more from me, because I'm not sure how much more I can contribute, but I'm very happy to answer any questions or to join in the discussion.
Thank you, Sonja. That's great. I do have a couple of questions just to sort of get the conversation going. I'm sure plenty of other people will want to contribute too. But you read out that quote from Mark Damazer, who was Radio 4 controller at the time the play first came out, and that rather odd statement of his that he wouldn't be able to run a drama that counters Caryl Churchill's view. I mean, to me, that raises two questions. You've obviously referred already to the question, why would you need to counteract the view? But what view do you think he thought she had? I mean, I think this is important. You know, people look at this play, and a friend of mine, for example, who is not Jewish but very interested in the whole Israel-Palestine question and very sympathetic to Palestine, she said she watched it, the film, when it first came out with me, and she said she thought it humanized Jews, which was an interesting comment. So can you have a go at that? Try and unpick what view does Caryl Churchill have, and what view do you think Mark Damaser thought she had, if you see what I mean? What made it so difficult for them to take it on board in mainstream media?
Yes, well, first of all, I think it's very valid what your friend said, because in every scene there was dissent. They didn't all coalesce and agree. They said they disagreed, in fact, right up to the end where you had that final speech. Interesting from the actor, I don't know if it's deliberate, but she was the actor who at the beginning was particularly sympathetic in a way, and then she turned, as though there is a sort of movement, within Israel itself, as we know now when we see what the polls are, in terms of how little empathy they have for what's going on in Israel now, and that the polls are absolutely shocking. I don't know what percentage, but a huge percentage of people who are completely without any sort of empathy and worse. So yes, so your question again is, what would be the counter to this play? In fact, what did they think her view was? Well, I think it's only from that last speech that they really must have felt that that we are all I think that we are full of hatred. That she I actually can't fully answer that question. In fact, maybe other people would like to. That the view is that she was anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish because she was portraying Jews in a negative light, when in fact, from my point of view, she's actually revealing the truth, very much so. Particularly that last speech, because actually it actually sums up precisely what's happening. Tell her that we won't stop killing until we're safe. Tell her I laughed when I saw the dead policeman. I mean, when we see all those soldiers who are actually doing selfies and laughing at what's happening as they blow up Palestinian homes. Tell her I laugh. Tell her they're animals. Well, we know what the quotations are from cabinet ministers in the Knesset. Tell her they're animals living in rubble. Well, rubble, we know about rubble. Tell her I wouldn't care if we wiped them out. The world would hate us is the only thing. Tell her I don't care if the world hates us. Tell her we're better haters. I mean, all those things are so completely relevant now. I haven't really answered your question. I'm just saying that this, I think, is the speech that people have particularly picked on in their critique, which I think is the most valid critique, actually, really.
So do you think maybe, Sonja, that at the time it could, in a valid way, be argued that that speech was over the top and that it did misrepresent Jews by and large? Whereas now, as you said, it would be quite difficult to argue that it did anything other than represent the truth. Do you think that maybe then there was some case for suggesting that it portrayed Jews in an unfair light?
Very possibly. And I think the peoples of the world, rather than the governments of the world, know now, they can really recognize that. Whereas at the time, as you say, perhaps not. And at the time in Operation Cast Lead, just over 1,000 Palestinians were killed. My God, it's tens of thousands now. So her play, it's even more pertinent now than it was then. I mean, it's prescient almost.
Right. I think there must be lots of people wanting to comment. I hope there will be a good conversation here today, because it has aroused so many emotions and sort of political disputes over the years. And I'd love to know what people in our audience today feel about it. So if people could use their electronic hands to put hands up, and I think we can let people have 2 or 3 minutes
I
because
think actually
yeah,
also the other thing I'd like to add,
yeah, go on.
talking that I think it is in fact a fantastic educational tool because it's a very, in brief, a history lesson, which could be deconstructed about, will schools be allowed to show it? I must ask my son, because he's a history teacher, I'd like to know his thoughts about that, because he's very much on our side. So, but I think it would be a brilliant tool, even if schools, because it could produce such amazing debate, you know, about what is anti-Semitism for a start.
Thank you for that observation too. Yes, could it be shown in schools? I see one hand straight away. Jonathan Rosenhead, would you like to, have unmuted? Go ahead.
Okay, well, yes, thank you very much. I did see the film a month or two ago in Muswell Hill, so it's my second viewing. But I also saw the original play at the Royal Court all those years ago, and I was interested in your suggestion that the film might work better. But I didn't find that. I think they're both fantastic and powerful, but actually making the pictures in your head of the background, the lack of a set wasn't of a dressed set was not a problem. It meant your mind worked and could construct what you wanted for where they were at the time. And I don't think there were any town locations or anything like that. It was more timeless. It was about the process of immigration and displacement rather than a historical thing. I thought that worked very well. Something else I'd like to say about why they wouldn't, the BBC wouldn't run it, because they couldn't find another play that did the job anything like as well. I think the reason why they can't is because there is no way you can produce a play for justifying Israel in a way that this implicitly or explicitly takes Israel and the settler colonial project to pieces. So what the BBC is actually saying, because there is no argument that's equivalent which could support the Israeli case, therefore the Palestinian case cannot be heard. I'll
I
stop
think
there.
that's very valid, Jonathan, what you said. And can I just say one thing? For you, the play worked very well. It did work well for me as a stage play, but you bring a lot to that play. You're very knowledgeable in a way I think the general public is not. And that's why I think it works better as a film for a general audience.
Fair enough. Thanks, Sonia. And thank you, Jonathan, for that opening question. I think the next person in line is Charlotte. Charlotte Williams. If you're not speaking, please mute, and then the person who's speaking can unmute themselves. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Hi, thank you very, very much. I mean, it could have been written yesterday. I have seen it before. I've seen the film before, but not the play. I did find it helpful having debates. But I had to do a sort of psychological switch in my brain, I realised afterwards, in order to kind of accommodate it as a Jew. So the characters start off being Jews, victims, and then they become Israelis. And at a certain point, I had to sort of tell myself, oh, these are Israelis. I can hate them. I can, they're not, I found myself confused about Jews and Israelis in a way that the public, you know, people who don't know as much as we do are. And so I wonder if there is some kind of case for conflating that the film in some way conflates Jews and Israel. I don't know. It just is just a sort of bit of a question mark I have, because that slide done so skillfully into perpetrator, it just kind of might not make it clear to an unknowing audience.
That's a very interesting point, which I hope other people in our audience will want to take up, Charlotte. Thank you. Next, I've got, it could be Richard or it could be Mika on that camera. Who's going to... Do you want to unmute?
All right.
Mika, you don't have to edge out of the picture. It's all right. Richard.
Just to say, it's worth remembering the furore created at the time. Howard Jacobson and Jacqueline Rose was very involved in debating it. And it was performed in Bolton at the Octagon at a day school, which I was invited to. And there was such a furore about it that they also invited Jonathan Hoffman and his gang, who produced a 7 Arab Children play, which we had to sit through, which followed this one, which was, it's hard to describe it now. It was a pathetic parody and people talking in thick guttural accents, so that as an audience, you could see these animals in front of you claiming that terrible things had happened to them. It was a most bizarre experience, that event. And at the Octagon, I think, was forced to allow that presentation as the only way they could have it without being accused of being anti-Semitic. But this whole thing as to whether it was anti-Semitic or not, and the point Charlotte raised, I think it was quite important that, and people said it was called 7 Jewish children, it wasn't called 7 Israeli children. But I think that was precisely the important point being made, that there was the continuity, that the Jews, having been persecuted, did become the Israelis and did become the persecutors. So, I think it worked very effectively like that. And then you do have the debates within the Jewish community, the Israeli community, as to how you explain it, or how you explain it to a daughter who is innocent and you can't tell the entire truth to. And this oscillation between the different positions, I think was done absolutely brilliantly. But also remember, 2008 Cast Lead, the 1,000+ people dead was truly shocking at the time. It was a response to an event which at that time felt like something new had happened. And therefore the poignancy of it at that time was extremely great. Watching it now, it's like a kind of description of day-to-day reality. I mean, the ending, all those things that come out in the last scene are really extremely powerful, but in an odd way don't feel like theatre. They feel like I've seen this on my television screen so many times. Now, I think it's a great educational piece. I think Sonja's absolutely right that most audiences can't, in the 10 minutes the play takes, bring to it enough to understand it. I mean, in the immediate aftermath of Cast Lead, there was a lot of information around, and I suspect theatre audiences did understand it at that point, or those who chose to go. I mean, it's a tiny section of the population who went, and I'm sure they did understand it. But as a more mass educational tool, I think the film has great advantages over the play, and I hope we can find ways to use it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard. That's excellent. Right, Neera Davis is next. Away you go.
Thank you very much. In a way, my question continues from Charlotte and Richard, because I was very interested in when you defined it as a Jewish experience rather than an Israeli experience. And I think this is some of the problem that I have it also as using as an educational instrument. It's very strong. I haven't seen the play. I haven't seen the film before. When I saw 2004, I thought, oh, that must be a mistake. It's 2024. The film is updating the play. I didn't realize that it was kind of producing it. But in JVL, and as I'm anti-Zionist diasporic Israeli, but one of the things that we are fighting against is the way that Israel is trying to conflate anti-Semitism and critique of Israel, all the IRA definition and all this kind of thing. And I think inadvertently, this film really reproduced this because it starts with a Jewish, the Jews as victim, and of course what was kind of implied in the last speech was also we are still the victim and therefore we can justify and hate everybody and we can do everything because we don't feel safe and our historical experience justify us not feeling safe. But what we want to say is that Israel is not the collective Jew, that there are other Jewish historical paths, there are diasporic Jewish community, and the common fate is against, together with other racialized minorities, for social justice and social equality. While this film, in a way, assumes, in the way that kind of the Schindler's, that the natural path of Jewish experience, historical parent, was from the diaspora and pogroms and the Holocaust into Israel and what has happened. I think we need to emphasize that this is one pathway. This is not the historical determination. Not all Jews have gone to Israel. Not all Jews in diaspora support Israel. And I think this is something which I think without this kind of contextualizing might kind of end up being counterproductive in spite of its brilliance and or maybe because of its brilliance and impact.
Can I just say, I think that's really interesting, this point that's been raised. But of course, it's just one family that's emigrated. You know, they've gone through the different dates. It's one family. You're following one family who chooses to go and live in Israel. And the other thing is, I think this is something that could be brought into the debate if it becomes an educational tool to make the distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. It could be a very good point of discussion, in fact, if it was handled in that way, and it should almost go with a package when it goes. And we should mention this to Omri Dayan, who's the filmmaker, because he's responsible for this film going out there, and maybe it's a good, valid point to be mentioned to him. This point that you've raised.
That's great, Sonja. What a good idea. I mean, there are little hints, aren't there, in the one or two hints, like the young man who says, they say, don't tell her cousin has refused to serve.
Yes.
Somebody says, maybe we can share. And somebody says, if I'd known what it was like, I wouldn't have come. But that's about it in terms of an alternative path that Nira was mentioning. Very interesting. Sorry, I'll stop abusing my position in the chair. I can see Miriam David would like to come in. Go ahead.
Yes, I would, because I think that the ways in which the discussion has gone has been a little overdetermined, because I think it starts off by being, okay, as everybody said, the history of Jews being the victim, pogroms, and then a very brief discussion of the Holocaust and its effect in London. And it's only the third episode, which initially might be quite confusing to people because there's a discussion about them leaving. But in all of the early episodes or acts or whatever they're called, there is a debate going on. And I think you're forgetting that this is a debating point. They're not all agreeing with each other. They're debating. And I think that's a very good educational tool. As an educator, I think that's what we should be emphasizing, that it's not all unidirectional, that there are possibilities to discuss this history and embellish it in presenting the film to audiences today. So I think it can be a very good tool for that, rather than it being too didactic or too critical. Although obviously I think it would need some more context to it now. But I as everybody else has said, I think it is brilliant. I didn't see it in 2009, but I have seen the film a few times. Thank you.
Yes, that's great. I just want to point out we will send you after this a link to the film, which, as Sonja said, you can view on YouTube. It's free to view. Omri is very keen for it to be widely viewed. The script, which Sonja has sent us, which we can share with you. A copy of Sonja's index article, which is very interesting, and also 2 links that Sonja's provided to a recent action which uses a more recent Caryl Churchill play as part of an activist event, and that's also very interesting. So lots of goodies coming your way after this. And Sonja, let's have a few more contributions from the floor, okay? So Monash Kessler, please come in. You've unmuted.
I mean, it's obviously only a partial history because, I mean, all these things are Ashkenazi orientated. They leave out a vast number of Jews, Sephardi and Arab Jews. None of that, you know, that has a different history, some similarities, but also lots of differences. So I just think you have to accept that it's not a complete history of Jews or Israel.
Oh, no more? Okay. Right. Let's see if there are any more hands going up. Seems not at the moment. Thanks, Monash. Sonja, do you want to come in with any new reflections?
Yeah, I was quite interested that in the script there's no mention of dates. This is something that the filmmaker has chosen to do, maybe just to guide us through history. So 1903, I don't know if that's a significant date, but that was the first date. Then it's 1945, so that's obviously has a significance. So that was in London, and referencing the recent, the discovery, if you like, of the loss of family members in the Holocaust. Then it moves to Belgium and Brussels. I don't know why. It says Brussels, 1951. And I thought, what's the significance of 1951? So I Googled it. And I couldn't really find a significance of that date. Maybe other people know, but it just, all it came up with is that in 1951, Jewish refugees who'd arrived in Belgium were given refugee status. They were given status as citizens. I don't know what that signifies. Then it moves to 1954, when they've arrived and they're in Haifa. Again, I'm not sure if anybody knows if that is a significant date. Obviously, the next one, 1967, is a very significant date. And 2003 was in the Israeli settlement. That was the number 6. And obviously, the last date was very significant. It was 2009. But I just wondered about these other dates. I don't know if anybody else had any idea why 1951 was significant in Brussels and 1954 was significant in Israel. Oh, yes, I think it must have been the first. It was their awareness in the 1954 one. It was the 4th section. They were suddenly being aware that they were Palestinians that could not be named. Are they Bedouins? You know, don't tell her who they are. You know, that was that section. Don't tell her that it was a land without a people for people without a land. That was in that section of the film.
Thanks, Sonja. Well, I've got 3 hands up, but they're all people who've already spoken. Is there nobody else? Go on then, Richard, you're first. Yeah.
I just want to say the first date, 1903, is the date of the Kishinev pogrom.
Ah, thank you.
A devastating event.
Sorry, I should have known that. Yeah.
European Jewish history, and had a major effect on people turning towards Zionism.
Thanks.
That's what I was going to say as well.
Okay.
1951, it may be, from the information you provided, Sonja, if that's when Jews had settled status in Belgium. This is a family who chose to leave Belgium when they could have stayed.
I think that was it. Yes, that's what I realised when I looked that up. Yeah.
54 just seems to be a date in the middle. You will have to ask the director.
Could I say, I think this shows the problem with putting dates on. I think the dates are some artificial, but the trajectory in the original play wasn't tied to any particular actions, and I think that was much more impressive than this attempt to try and fit it onto a specific historical context. The broad context is clear.
That is interesting. May I just say that my granny came over from Ukraine in 1903, age 3, and that's probably why.
Yes.
Never spoke about it. Well, I suppose if she was 3, she wouldn't have been all that aware. She would have been one of those children not being told what was going on, wouldn't she? Amazing. Oh, nice to see a fresh hand. May I invite Linda Walker, to come in? Thank you, Linda. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not Jewish, but I am a very supportive member of JVL because I think you do such wonderful work. And just thinking about using this as an educational tool, it would be absolutely brilliant, but I can't see how it's ever going to happen under this government, because they take every possible opportunity to conflate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And the BBC would have exactly the same response now about the film or the play, wouldn't they? Only yesterday, Zara Sultana was being interviewed by Chris Mason, and she mentioned genocide and apartheid, and he immediately said, of course, most people would dispute that, and the International Court of Justice will decide whether it was genocide. So there's still a blanket refusal to accept the horrors of what's happening and how Israel has turned into the perpetrator. But certainly to use it for education of people who don't quite understand. I have a friend who doesn't believe that people in Israel are indoctrinated from childhood about the Palestinians. So I'll certainly send it to her and see if it helps to make her think about what has really happened. So thank you very much. It's been really interesting.
Great. Let us know how your friend takes it, Linda. That would be interesting.
Thank you.
Sonia,
I will actually ask my son if he would. He teaches at a school in Tottenham, Parkview. Whether I will run it by him as to whether the school would show it, because in 2010, in fact, I wrote a documentary play called Palestine Monologues. And that was shown in schools. That's when I was still with Ice and Fire Theatre. And it went round the country, and it was shown in one particular school. So I wonder if how the climate has changed. Be interesting to find out. If I get a response, I'll let you know. Okay, you can pass it on.
Thanks very much. We have many very unfortunate experiences of trying to get involved in educational work in schools, just as speakers, as Jewish people with an alternative view, wanting to come in and challenge the usual narrative. I can see Leia's hand up. Thank you, Linda, for your question. Leia Bain.
Thanks. First of all, thank you. It's been a long time since I've read or seen the play, and I hadn't seen the film before. I just want to come in on this thing about, I totally agree it would be a brilliant educational tool, and I think it's very sympathetic to the Jewish experience at the beginning, and you don't want to leave that behind, and you can still be sympathetic about these are the circumstances that they found themselves in. So obviously I don't think it's anti-Semitic. The issue about getting it into schools, I mean, I live in Hastings we've been trying, we have a local Jewish group just to run like the Holocaust Memorial event. And we're going to still try maybe for 2027. But we've been invited into a school, but a brilliant history teacher, but I am waiting for them to say no. And I'm also stunned by the amount of work they do on the Holocaust.
Yes, in the syllabus.
Obviously it's important. I don't want it not on the syllabus, but they do a huge amount. So they're actually, what we're being asked to do is run 5 assemblies, one for each year group across the 5 years. Every single group is expected to do a sort of, in addition to what they do in the classroom, they'll have a dedicated assembly. And so I think that it will be really hard to get this into school. I will send it to the teacher or via my colleague, because that could be something that they use. And of course, the young people, certainly by the time they get to 13, 14, 15, 16, they want to talk about what's happening in Palestine. And it feels like a disservice. And, this is a whole separate conversation. But I would be so interested to know about any successes in getting this head of school, because I think it's quite nuanced and you could have extremely good discussions around it about the Jewish history, as well as obviously what's happening in Israel and where it is and where it isn't connected. So I'll obviously keep my JVL colleagues informed, but I think it's a fascinating and brilliant tool. And thank you so much for your presentation as well, Sonja.
Yes, absolutely. Right, I'm looking around for any new people who want to ask questions. Hello there. Yes, Linda, please go ahead.
Hello. I have to confess I haven't yet seen the play or the film, but I wonder whether perhaps it would help to widen out your approach towards, quotes, education. I'm thinking, for example, that groups like the WI, Towns Women's Guilds, etc., are going to be less defensive. They're smaller, but they actually have the capacity to come together as a national group, which sometimes frightens politicians. Tony Blair, for example, came a cropper. Palmer would cope even less well. So it might be worthwhile just asking yourselves what local groups might want something different.
Linda, thank you for that. Yeah, you have a point. I mean, we've tended to stick to Palestine solidarity groups, really, and for a couple of years, groups inside the Labour Party, even though they were banned officially from having anything to do with us. But now that we are free agents, why should we not indeed approach all sorts of other groups? Not a bad idea. Sonja, do you have any thoughts on that? Where thinking about new audiences for a film like this, people who may be curious about Palestine now, who in previous years weren't?
Yeah, I mean, I know that when I was with Ice and Fire, we did a lot of work on documentary plays that was largely about refugees initially, and then because of that, I suggest that we then do a play on refugees, because Israel, Palestine, Palestinian refugees, it seemed very pertinent. And I co-wrote a play with Ada Kay, Jonathan. You knew Ada well, didn't you? Called Welcome to Ramallah. And as a companion piece, I created Palestinian monologues. And what Ice and Fire did very successfully is that they gave their documentaries free to community organizations. So it could be a church organization, it could be a local amnesty organization, it could be the WI, all these community organizations. And that was very successful, because what they did, we would send them our documentary plays, including this, and we said, just please pay for our actors' travel and for some refreshments, and we give you this play and this performance free and lead a discussion afterwards. And that was a brilliant model that continues to this day. So that's picking up from what you said before about finding new ways of addressing communities, as opposed to the more standard model.
And that's sending a troupe of actors around. So that's more demanding than what we're suggesting.
Yes, we just sent 6 actors around, or 4, or whatever it required.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sonja. I see Shireen, if you'd like to unmute.
Thanks very much. Yeah, the film's completely new to me. I didn't see the stage show. I hadn't seen the film before this evening. So it's taking me a while, because I'm needing to kind of think through the issues. So apologies for being a bit late to have any thoughts to marshal and put together. And thank you so much for organising this. It's really good to see the film. I must have been living under a stone. I hadn't even heard of it. I'm based in Scotland, where the education system is a bit different. I think it would be a struggle to get it into schools, but for maybe a slightly different reason, which is that I think teachers would feel scared and unsure of the ground. I mean, I think it is a really powerful film that says so much about kind of the victim narrative in general, and how that can take hold on a through the generations. I think it's got so much to say about Israel-Palestine, but more broadly. But I think a lot of teachers would find it quite scary. I don't think we'd have the same problem with local authorities, local authority areas and the national curriculum. It's not the same here, but I think teachers would be scared to use it, which makes me wonder if another kind of audience could be found in teacher education, because I know there's a lot of discussion in universities at the moment, and I'm wondering about university departments of education, whether that's a place to think about whether the film could find an audience and find discussion, so that the next generations of teachers are more equipped and more confident in handling some of these big themes that are part of the film.
Can I just address
Yeah,
that
come back
very
in,
briefly?
Sonja.
I think as we did in my company, Ice and Fire, I think the film needs to be accompanied by somebody accompanying the film, a Jewish person, maybe from our group, to lead the discussion, because if you have a Jewish person presenting the film, you know, apparently it can't be anti-Semitic, though in fact we know that's been distorted. But I think it needs to have, the film package has to come with a Jewish person engaged in leading the discussion.
Yes, I'm sure that would strengthen the case for using it. Interesting ideas here. Okay, I'm casting around to see if anybody else would like to come in. We've got, yes, please, Carolyn, please unmute.
Hi again, Sonja.
Oh, hello, Carolyn.
Spent the
Fellow
afternoon.
Peacenik.
So I just wanted to say, I know the system in Scotland's really different, but I don't know if people are aware, most teacher training doesn't happen at university anymore. It actually is undertaken by these multi-academy trusts or school-based training. And I go into all the secondary schools in Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea. And I think I'm happy to raise this. I'm actually going to set up a community practice not about obviously about Palestine. It's to do with my area of work. And I think it's about kind of raising it within relations. I think it's about relationship building. So somebody like myself, who's in a fortunate position that goes regularly into schools and who is able to build a relationship, can have that conversation about showing the film. But, you know, my bet would be that the only schools that are likely to allow it are private schools, sadly, that you're not, but, you know, maybe there's, you know, an opening there. I'll be really interested to hear what your son says, Sonja. In where I work, I'm pretty well, I could bet my life savings, which are fairly meager, but still on, you know, that it would be a very difficult thing to do in schools. But then I was thinking about some of the other things that people raised about other avenues. But so in education, I tell you who is discussing it are the mental health teams, the social work teams, and the educational psychologists have set up in many local authorities, set up discussion groups. And I was invited to one because I know one of the people who was involved in setting it up where I work. And what was really interesting is what started off as a discussion about, you know, talking about Palestine, Israel, very quickly became a discussion about racism towards Asian and Black workers in the borough I work, which I thought was very interesting. And I think the final thing I just wanted to say was that I've completely forgotten. Sorry, I've forgotten there was another point I wanted to make about raising it. But I think, you know, getting into, I know what I wanted to say. The other thing that I think is most upsetting about all this is just like in the Iraq War, we have lots of children from the Middle East in London schools, and they're not being allowed to talk about it. You know, as they weren't allowed to talk about the Iraq War in schools because it might start a fight in the school, in the playground. again, kids, and we do have Palestinian kids in our schools actually, but we've also got lots of children from Syria and from Lebanon and from countries that are also, you know, either Palestinian themselves through ancestry or concerned, and they're not being really enabled to have those discussions as young people, which I think is really a crime, really. But anyway, it's my thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a widely acknowledged problem in the National Education Union, actually, that we can't talk about this. Though some people manage it. Miriam, want to come back in?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Carolyn, for your comments just now. We in JVL did try last year to get into some private schools and failed miserably because we were Jewish people on the wrong side. And they were North London schools on the whole, which had a large Jewish population. So perhaps that was a key problem, and they weren't the multi-academy trust that you were talking about. But still, it is an ongoing problem. The other organisation that we have tried a bit, and perhaps Glyn wants to come in here, because we have been trying to work with trade unions to some extent, and perhaps some educational trade unions. Well, we did try the NEU, didn't we, Naomi, as a way forward? Yes. But it's quite hard work getting an alternative voice heard there. But I just thought your point, Carolyn, about private schools might be more sympathetic is probably not the case for us.
That's probably true. Good. We've got two new hands. Thanks, Mickey. So Dee, would you like to come in? So unmute yourself. And then Glyn. Unmute. Find the button. Yeah, that should work.
I think if you want to get to young people, have you thought of the woodcraft folk? Because
The woodcraft folk.
For right up to adult and beyond, you know, and they are people who would definitely be interested in something like that, I would have thought, you know, and they don't have all the rules and regulations that a lot of schools have, you know, so, you know, they're older people, they're venturers to start off as well as they're adults. You know, I just think that, you know, it's definitely worth a try with them.
We'll put them on the list. We've never formally approached woodcraft folk. Thanks, Dee. That's great. Okay. Glyn is next. Yeah. I think we kind of strayed away from the subject of the play and the film, but anyway, we did want to talk about its potential as an educational tool. So far away, if that's what you want to talk about.
Well, first of all, apologies for coming in late. I was trying to do too much this afternoon. I was at the South London Your Party Assembly, which I thought was important. And of course it ran late, so I'm late. I'm sorry. The bit of the film, I haven't seen the film before. As I say, I just came in halfway through just now and it looked tremendous. And I saw the original play at the Royal Court upstairs, and remember the impact that it made then. It seems to me that the target audience is actually a Jewish audience, and that's the one that's really difficult to get into. Yeah, we failed miserably after huge effort to get into those two North London schools. I would think we could get into a number of East London schools, but you know that, if you like, is cutting with the grain, where they've got large Muslim populations. Maybe we could have another go at the trade unions, particularly the education unions. You know, they've developed since we were last trying to get a foot in there. I mean, and that's all because of the horrors of Gaza, and because, as Sonja was saying, that I mean, it's so apposite. You couldn't make it up. You know, the link between the script then and what's been happening now in Gaza, so powerful. And it would be good, I think, if we could organize groups of teachers to watch it, not necessarily in the expectation that they would be able to show it in their schools, because that would continue to be problematic. But there are lots of teachers who are having quite a hard time caught between their human reactions to what's going on in Gaza and now the West Bank, of course, and the increasingly hardline position that their heads and school admins are taking and closing down discussion. And just for them to be able to see a Jewish production perspective like this, I think would be they'd welcome it, and because it's so short, they don't have to carve out a large amount of time to watch it. And I've on my phone, you just have to put in YouTube Jewish 7 Jewish children, and 3 or 4 copies pop up straight away. It's immediately available. I don't know whether that's the algorithms my phone is feeding me. It probably is, but I think we ought to have another go at the trade union, and maybe the left unions should be more amenable now. And look what's happening with Unison, the election that's just taking place for the General Secretary of Unison. I think the person who's going to win that has mentioned Gaza. She's got a radical program. It's going to transform Unison, which is the biggest union. Things might be opening up. You never know.
Thanks for that very optimistic note there. We should be closing in about 7 or 8 minutes. So I wonder if just a quick cast around to see if there's anybody else who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to chip in now. Don't see any extra hands. So maybe Sonja, I've already mentioned the various things that materials that we're going to send to everybody. But if you'd like to say anything in response to the discussion or to explain about some of the things we're going to send people and their relevance, that would be great. And then we can all waltz off into the night. Oh, I think you're still muted. Or yeah.
I think it's been a great discussion because it's raised things that I haven't thought of, which is always good. And the idea of taking it to other places, ideally places where you're not preaching to the converted, is terrific. And I will ask my son and I will feed back to you. But in terms of Caryl Churchill's current very short play, her 5-minute play, which is amazing and which you can see online. I sent you the link, I think, didn't I, Naomi?
Yes.
An organization called Culture Unstained. I'm sorry, it's fireworks in the background. Culture Unstained. They drew up a big van in front of the Old Vic Theatre a few weeks ago, on the side of which was a huge film screen projection with this short film on it. And they were protesting against they wanted the Old Vic to divest from the Royal Bank of Canada. And they say it outside on press night, where you've got all the glitterati sitting out, waiting out on the street to go in, holding their programs. There was this van in front. It's brilliant. You can see that. There was this van telling them, please boycott this theatre that you're about to go into, and telling them why, with this 5-minute play, which is completely brilliant. It's even more elliptical than 7 Jewish Children. It's fantastic. So I've sent that to Naomi. You can see that, and you can see the play itself. It's brilliant. It's very, very witty, very sardonic.
What was the title?
The title of the
I've
play
put it in the
was,
chat, actually.
yes, as tickets are on sale. And the organisation was called Culture Unstained, and it's a 5-minute play by Caryl Churchill, which is created now as part of the boycott and divestment crusade that she very much supports.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much. I have popped some of those links into the chat. I don't know if people can see them, but I think we'll have a sort of post session email in a couple of days and send you lots of useful links. I found this really, oh, sorry, Miriam, do you want to come
Yes,
into?
I thought, Sonja, you were going to mention A State of Passion.
Oh, yeah. So
Oh, yes,
Miriam
so
just
tell us
says,
more about that. Yeah.
yes, Miriam and my Jewish Peaceniks organisers who are on this Zoom, we just presented at Highgate Library a screening of a film called A State of Passion, which is about Dr. Rassam Abu Sita, that well-known Palestinian British surgeon, brilliant and deeply humane man. It tells the story, and it was screened as part of something called World Palestine Cinema Day, which is November the 2nd. So they offered 7 films free on this day to be shown all around the world. So 160 screenings all around the world. And we chose this one out of the 7, and it's absolutely devastating on the one hand and deeply inspiring because of him on the other hand. And I totally recommend it. I don't know where it's going to be screened, but we might be able to screen it, you know, in a small way, or rescreen it, because we now have the film, but we'd have to get the permission of the filmmakers. But it's just an amazing film, which is, as you say, Miriam, we came from that screening reeling, you know, to come on this webinar tonight. I don't know if you want to add anything, Miriam, to that.
No, it was just the title almost says it all, A State of Passion.
Yes.
It's also horrifying and humane in equal measure, I think.
Yes.
It's the most
yes.
humane, humanitarian man. Yes.
Amazing man.
It is
You
wonderful.
saw him in the context of his home in London, in the context of visiting his mother in, I think, Beirut. And also you saw him at work in Gaza, which was absolutely horrific. Just simple everyday things like he irons his son's shirts every day before they go to school, or he makes their lunches, he ties their ties because his wife can't do it. So you had all these wonderful little contrasts between his own humanity as a wonderful father, and also a very moving story about his wife, whose family are in Gaza as we see the film and as she's telling the story, and whose uncle was killed during the making of the film, and his head was, he was decapitated, and the body was then delivered to her father, his 76-year-old father, whose house was then demolished. So it's just an incredible story in itself, just his own family story. So it's a really powerful film, which I hope gets screened, you know, everywhere.
Sonja, thank you. My goodness, no, it's exactly 7:30 by my clock anyway, so perfect timing there. Thank you again to everybody who came this evening. A lot more people registered than actually turned up, so they all missed out, didn't they? We were the privileged ones. But we do have a recording of Sonja's presentation. We'll be able to send that out with all these links we've been talking about, and lots of interesting ideas for us to follow up on education work broadly and how to use this remarkable new film of an amazing play. Thank you very much, everybody.